Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are plunging into an environment where, well, the information noise floor is impossibly high. It feels like a world saturated with voices, all of them claiming certainty, authority, and, often exclusive access to the truth.
And this challenge, this problem of navigating competing narratives, it's not new at all. Our sources show that even in ancient times, the land was full of voices, many crying out with really convincing rhetoric, yet leading their listeners astray.
So the central mission of this deep dive is to, extract and analyze the criteria these ancient texts gave people. How do you discern genuine authority when so many words, as the source says, sounded holy and were not?
Precisely. We're looking at a structured approach pulled directly from these texts on how to critically evaluate not just the claims, but the words themselves. The goal here is clarity in the middle of all that confusion.
Okay, so where do we begin?
We begin with the fundamental danger. The sources are very clear that the greatest threat they're addressing here is not some kind of external persecution. It's not military might. It's a slow, insidious process. They call it corruption from within.
Corruption from within. That sounds subtle. What's the primary criteria listeners were given to recognize that kind of internal erosion?
It comes right out of the New Testament, specifically in Colossians chapter 2, verse 8 says, "Beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit, after the tradition of men, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ."
Spoil you. That word choice is so visual, it doesn't sound like a sudden catastrophe. It sounds more like plunder.
Exactly, that's the perfect word. The Greek imagery there is literally about carrying away loot captured in war. You don't lose your faith all at once. It's stripped away piece by piece by ideas that sound persuasive but are ultimately empty.
So it's not a frontal assault, it's being quietly carried off the battlefield.
That's it. And the mechanism for that is right there in the text. Philosophy and vain deceit. And then these two technical terms, tradition of men and rudiments of the world.
Okay, let's pause on that last one, rudiments of the world. What did the writers actually mean by that? Was that a specific set of practices, or are we talking about a general worldview they were warning against?
It was much broader than just specific practices. The rudiments, the word in Greek is stoicheia. It referred to the basic foundational principles of the cosmos, or of societal structure. The warning wasn't against learning, of course, but against adopting the flawed worldview of the world system as your standard.
Instead of the divine standard.
Right. It's allowing human reasoning and societal norms, which are always changing, to redefine or even replace what's supposed to be absolute truth.
So if the foundations of the world are the basis for the deceit, then the only defense is knowing some absolute standard to measure everything else against.
Precisely. And the ancient antidote, which the psalmist noted long before this, is finding understanding through precepts. That understanding leads to a hatred of every false way. If you don't recognize the true benchmark, you just can't reliably reject the false path.
That sets the stage perfectly for our first big question. If the antidote is hating the false way, you first have to identify who's speaking it. If so many voices are quoting sacred words and claiming authority, our sources point us not to the content first, but to the source of authorization itself. And for that, we turn to the prophet Jeremiah.
Yes, Jeremiah was dealing with a huge crisis of institutional authority. I mean, he was surrounded by religious leaders who were extremely active,
Right.
running here, preaching there, but they were completely unauthorized.
They were freelancers, essentially.
In a way, yes. His core critique, you find it in Jeremiah 23, was that these prophets spoke a vision of their own heart and not out of the mouth of the Lord. And that is the primary distinction the ancient listener was supposed to grasp. Are you speaking from ambition or from divine authorization?
That phrase, a vision of their own heart, suggests a profound self-delusion. It wasn't necessarily a malicious lie. It could have been a deep psychological commitment to their own ideas, just disguised as truth.
Well, it was a crisis of authorization, and the distinguishing marks of the unsent were clear. Jeremiah 23.21 says, "They run, yet were not sent. They preached, yet were not commanded. They had all the zeal, all the activity, but no standing mandate. They were self-appointed."
But how could an ordinary person know if the speaker was meant or not? I mean, it's easy for the speaker to just say, "I was sent."
And that's where the source material gives us this deeply philosophical test. The critical question is laid out in Jeremiah 23.18. It asks, "For who hath stood in the counsel of the Lord, and hath perceived and heard his word? Who hath marked his word and heard it?"
Standing in the council. What does that phrase even imply? It sounds like more than just attending a meeting.
Oh, much more. It implies intimate knowledge, authorized representation. It means being an eyewitness to the divine standard. In the ancient Near East, only the people closest to the king stood in the council. It meant you had access to the decree, you knew the full mandate, and were authorized to transmit it.
I see. So Jeremiah is saying these busy self-appointed prophets, they lacked that intimate authorizing mandate. They were just extrapolating from their own, limited human understanding.
Exactly. And this test of authorization, it leads directly to the consequence.
Okay, so what was the practical outcome for the people listening to these unauthorized voices?
They failed at the one thing the authentic word is supposed to achieve: transformation. Jeremiah 23.22 states it plainly. If they had stood in my counsel, then they should have turned them from their evil way.
Wow.
The unauthorized word, because it lacks that fire of divine mandate, it also lacks the power to turn people from sin. The result for the listeners, according to the source material, was that they remained comfortable but unchanged.
That is the profound insight right there. Comfort without transformation is, by this ancient standard, a symptom of a false message. If the person feels fine, feels affirmed, but their life and standards are identical to the world around them, that's a red flag.
It is. The true word, the one rooted in divine counsel, it always demands a disruptive, life-altering change. The word spoken from the vision of one's own heart just affirms the listener's current desires. It's built to appeal to human weakness, not challenge it.
So if comfort is the result, the message itself must be deceptively appealing. Let's dig into the content of that appeal. Our sources seem to characterize this false teaching by two major shifts: a reversal of standards and a promise of false peace.
That's right. The reversal of moral standards is laid out by Isaiah as the ultimate woe. In chapter 5, verse 20, he says, "Woe unto them that call evil good, and good evil, that put darkness for light, and light for darkness."
That makes the lie incredibly hard to spot. It's not introducing a new standard, it's using the same words as the truth, but assigning opposite values. It subverts from within.
Exactly. When the sources talk about moral reversal, they mean repackaging something destructive as, say, progressive or necessary. And, conversely, casting genuine prudence or established boundaries as oppression or outdated. The lie thrives on semantic camouflage.
Okay, so that's the moral reversal. What about the false reassurance?
Ezekiel saw that these seducers deliberately misdiagnosed the spiritual condition of the people. In chapter 13, he says they have seduced my people, saying peace, and there was no peace.
So they're promising safety, harmony, tranquility, when the underlying reality demanded urgent correction. It sounds like selling a false cure for a real sickness. The content is just designed to make the listener feel better immediately, regardless of the facts.
It's entirely audience-driven comfort, and here's a critical point. The source material also brings up Moses' ancient warning, confirming that impressive signs or wonders do not automatically equal truth.
Right. This pushes the listener away from spectacle and towards scrutiny.
Precisely. Deuteronomy 13 is cited to show that even if a prophet giveth thee a sign or a wonder, and that sign actually happens, you should not listen to them if their message tells you to move away from the established word.
That's a profound point. Powerful emotion, impressive displays, perceived miracles. None of that is the ultimate test. They can just bypass critical thinking.
They do. The sources are adamant. Signs do not prove truth. Only obedience to the established, enduring word does. And this requires the listener to be intellectually engaged, to be grounded in the standard before they encounter the spectacular claim.
So if these false messages offer comfort, peace, and maybe even impressive signs, what does the authentic message offer? Because if truth demands transformation, it sounds inherently challenging.
It offers challenge, purification, and change. The sources use really violent, transformative imagery for the authentic message. It's summarized in Jeremiah 23.29. "Is not my word like as a fire, saith the Lord, and like a hammer that breaketh the rock in pieces?"
That's intense. Why did the ancient writers choose such violent imagery, fire and a hammer, instead of something gentler like a lamp or a well?
Because the function of the authentic word isn't just illumination, it's destruction and refinement. Fire purifies. It consumes the dross of the ego and tests the metal of your conviction. The hammer, well, it breaks resistance. It shatters the pride and stubbornness of a hardened heart that insists on its own way.
I see. So the reason false teachers soften the word, as the source material says, is because the real truth demands repentance. And repentance requires destroying those comfortable, self-justifying lies.
Yes. The challenge itself is a confirmation of authenticity. If a message never asks you to change or confront a deep internal flaw, then by this standard, it's suspect. Truth works on the heart. And this insidious nature of deception is why Jesus later echoed these same Old Testament warnings.
Focusing specifically on the character and the concealment of the messenger.
Exactly. We see it in Matthew 7.5. Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. The key word there is clothing. They are disguised. They adopt the appearance of piety, of humility, of authority.
And the analysis we have here is crucial. Not all wolves snarl. Some preach gently. It reinforces the idea that the smooth presentation, the palatable message, is often part of the deception itself. The gentleness is camouflage.
And that brings us to the difficult reality that often the listeners enable the deception. The apostles talk about itching ears, people who will not endure sound, difficult doctrine and instead gather teachers after their own lusts.
So the demand for comfortable, affirming doctrine actually creates a market for the supply of false teachers.
It does. The audience demands comfort, and the deceitful workers rise to meet that demand, transforming themselves into apostles of Christ. The packaging is spiritually perfect, but the product is still vain deceit.
Which leads us directly to the practical solution, because the believer was never meant to be left helpless or forced to rely purely on instinct.
No, absolutely not.
So what defense was given to the listener? Our source material makes it abundantly clear. The word itself is the objective external measure.
This is the ultimate non-negotiable test. You find it in Isaiah 8.20. To the law and to the testimony. If they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light in them. This immediately establishes the standard. The source material, the sacred writings themselves are the reference point. Everything must be weighed against them.
That shifts the responsibility from judging the speaker's character, which is hard to see, to judging the content against a document you can actually measure it against.
Yes, and the sources provide a phenomenal historical example of what this proper discernment looks like in action. It's the story of these noble-minded people who did not just blindly accept teaching.
We're talking about the believers in Acts 17.11. They're described as more noble. What did they do that was so special?
Well, they're characterized by two simultaneous actions, and they seem almost contradictory. First, they received the word with all readiness of mind. So they were humble, willing to learn, not cynical or closed off.
Okay, but there's a second part.
There is, and it's crucial. They searched the scriptures daily, whether those things were so.
That's the key tension. It wasn't simple acceptance. That would be naivety. And it wasn't cynical rejection. It required real intellectual work, the readiness to receive and the vigilance to verify every single day.
It demands that the listener invest time and effort in the standard itself. You can't verify the claims if you don't know the standard. And this leads to that final call for watchfulness, a call that echoes across generations, summarized in 1 John 4.1. Beloved, believe not every spirit, but try the spirits whether they are of God. Testing isn't optional, it's the listener's duty.
And ultimately, the source material anchors this entire system of evaluation back to a single measure that contains all truth: Christ alone.
That's the center point. Colossians 2.3 provides the context for why. In whom are hid all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. So anything that moves the heart away from him, no matter how sophisticated the philosophy or how persuasive the speaker is, by this standard, not truth.
The assurance for those trying to navigate this landscape comes from the shepherd himself. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. If we connect all of this ancient framework, to the modern listener who is just drowning in information, what's the core takeaway?
The entire message is, I think, a timeless plea for rigorous critical thinking. It's about prioritizing authenticity, the hard truth of the hammer and fire over the comfort of vain deceit. The sources are telling us that the most dangerous deception often comes dressed up as familiar, affirming authority. And the choice for the listener is always between the narrow way, defined by that objective standard, and the popular one, defined by the desires of the world.
The warning is clear, and the standard is set. The sources conclude that the end of deception is judgment, but the end of truth is life. We're left with this powerful final instruction, something for you, the listener, to mull over long after this deep dive is done.
It's a short but incredibly profound line from Proverbs 23.23.
Buy the truth and sell it not. And maybe you should consider what buying the truth requires of you today. What effort, what vigilance in daily searching, what sacrifice of your own comfortable assumptions. What does that purchase price entail? That's your deep dive homework.